Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping into, well, a pretty intense scene from ancient Athens. We're going into a gymnasium, but it's not just about physical exercise.
Not at all. We're diving into Plato's dialogue, Charmides. It's a real philosophical workout.
Right, and the focus is laser sharp. Just one big virtue, Sophrosyne.
Exactly. Temperance, self-control, sound-mindedness. It has a few translations, but it's this core idea of, well, having yourself together mentally and morally.
So what's the plan? Are we just reading through it?
No, much more than that. We're tracing the process of thinking here, following Socrates as he and his companions try and maybe fail to pin down what temperance actually is.
Okay.
It's about experiencing that, that intellectual struggle, how hard it is to define something that feels noble, something we think we understand. We want to really get into the arguments, the logic, the twists and turns.
Got it. And the setting sounds pretty cool. Socrates just back from war.
Yeah, straight from the battle lines at Potidaea, part of the Peloponnesian War. He says he's craving conversation, so he makes a beeline for the Palaestra of Taurius.
The gym, where people worked out but also, like, debated stuff.
Precisely. It was a hub. Physical training meets intellectual wrestling. He bumps into his friends, Chaerephon and Critias, and the talk immediately shifts. Forget the war for a second. What about the youth? Is there anyone in Athens who's got both beauty and virtue?
Ah, the classic Greek ideal.
So the Palaestra itself kind of sets the stage, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This contrast between the physical, the body's training, and the philosophical depth Socrates is after. He sees familiar faces, but then everything changes.
Because he walks in. Charmides?
Yes, Charmides, Critias' cousin. And apparently he was the looker of his day. Socrates himself, who usually isn't focused on appearances, admits he was just, well, stunned by his looks.
The sources compare him to a statue.
Literally, like a work of art walking in. Apparently everyone just stopped and stared. It caused this huge commotion. You couldn't tell if people were just awestruck or confused.
Wow.
And Critias, who's sort of his guardian, pipes up and says, yeah, he's beautiful, sure, but he's just as fair and good within as he is without. He even claims the kid's already a philosopher.
That's a big claim. Sets things up perfectly for Socrates, I bet.
Oh, completely. Socrates jumps on it. Okay, before we judge the outside, let's check the inside. Let's examine the soul. If Charmides is really this perfect example, he must have Sophrosyne, temperance.
But how do you just start examining someone's soul? Sounds awkward.
Right. Well, Critias gives him the perfect opening. He mentions Charmides has been complaining about headaches lately.
A headache. That's the way in.
It is. This is where Socrates lays the trap, or maybe the philosophical hook. He says, oh, I know a cure for that. It's a special leaf, but it only works with a charm.
A charm. Like a magical spell.
Not quite magic, but definitely something beyond just the physical leaf. Socrates makes this absolutely crucial point. Without the charm, the leaf would be of no avail.
Ah, okay. So the physical cure depends on something else entirely. Something non-physical.
Exactly. It's conditional. It depends entirely on the person's, let's say, moral or intellectual state.
And that leads to this Zamaxis idea.
Yes, the Zamaxis principle. It's the philosophical bedrock for the whole conversation. Socrates says he learned it from a physician who served Zamaxis, this Thracian king, who was considered, well, kind of a godlike figure.
Okay, a Thracian doctor's wisdom. What was it?
Socrates explains what this doctor told him. Greek physicians, they often get it wrong. They make a fundamental mistake.
Which is?
Treating the parts separately, trying to cure the eyes without thinking about the head, or trying to fix the head without considering the whole body. This fragmented approach, the Thracian argued, just doesn't work. It's doomed to fail.
Right, you can't isolate things like that. It sounds pretty modern, actually, this holistic view.
It really does. And then comes the big leap, the core of the Socratic argument here. The Thracian physician apparently insisted, if you can't cure the body without the head, then neither ought you to attempt to cure the body without the soul.
Wow. Okay, that is a leap.
It's huge. It's this radical idea, for the time especially. All good, all evil, whether it's physical illness or, character flaws, it all originates in the soul. That's the source. And it overflows from the soul into the body and the rest of human nature.
So to fix the body, even just a headache.
You have to start with the soul. You could cure the soul first, and that's what the charm is for.
The charm cures the soul. And what is the charm exactly?
Socrates calls them fair words.
Fair words, like beautiful speeches, or true words?
Probably both. Words that somehow implant virtue. Specifically, they implant Sophrosyne, temperance, into the soul.
I see.
Only when that temperance is there, when the soul is in its right state, balanced and ordered, Only then can you effectively heal the body. Health follows quickly once the soul is right.
That's a brilliant setup. It completely reframes the situation.
Absolutely. So Socrates basically says, look, I swore an oath to this Thracian doctor. I cannot give you the leaf for your headache until you first submit your soul to these fair words, this charm.
Which means submitting to a philosophical examination.
Exactly. He has to find out if Charmides already is temperance. And if not, Charmides has to undergo the process, the questioning that might instill it. It forces this deep dive into the concept itself before any simple cure is given.
So the headache is almost irrelevant now. It's become a test of virtue. Charmides, this supposedly perfect young man, has to prove it or, well, learn it through Socrates' method.
Precisely. The stage is set for the intellectual sparring to begin.
Okay, so the challenge is laid down. How does Charmides react? Does he jump right in?
Well, interestingly, his first reaction is described quite vividly. He blushes.
Blushes.
Yeah, a sign of eidos, which is like shame or modesty. Socrates actually notes it makes him look even more beautiful, funnily enough.
Yeah.
But the blush also shows his difficulty.
Difficulty how?
Think about it. Socrates asks him, essentially, are you temperate? If he says yes, he sounds arrogant, which isn't very temperate. But if he says no, he's either lying or admitting he lacks this great virtue everyone thinks he has. It's a trap.
Ah, right. A catch-22. So his hesitation, his blushing, could almost be seen as a sign of temperance, if temperance is modesty.
Exactly. It's a neat little paradox right at the start. But Socrates doesn't let him off the hook with just a blush. He says, look, if this virtue really is in you, you must have some feeling, some opinion about what it is. Let's figure it out together.
Puts him on the spot again. So what's Charmides' first actual definition?
He comes up with something that probably sounded pretty reasonable to an Athenian ear. He suggests temperance is about doing things orderly and quietly.
Quietness, like walking without rushing, talking softly, being composed.
Yeah, that kind of dignified slowness and orderliness. The Greek word is hesychia, quietness, stillness, tranquility.
Okay. And you mentioned this might have been like a popular idea linked to the aristocracy.
Very likely.
Yeah.
It fits that image of the composed upper-class citizen who isn't caught up in the, hustle and bustle or loud emotions of the masses. It suggests control, stability, self-possession.
Seems plausible as a starting point. How does Socrates tackle it?
He starts, as always, from common ground. Okay, we all agree temperance is a good thing, right? A noble quality.
Sure.
Right. But then he applies the test. Is quietness always the best quality in any given action? Is the quiet way always a noble way?
And he goes through examples.
Methodically. He basically forces the definition to work everywhere, or not at all. He starts simple. Writing letters. Is it better, more admirable, to write slowly and quietly, or quickly and efficiently?
Quickly.
Reading.
Ow.
Same thing. You want to read proficiently, quickly. Then he moves to physical skills, things Athenians admired. Wrestling, running, boxing.
Yeah, you don't want the slow wrestler or the quiet boxer. You want speed, power, agility.
Exactly. In almost all these praiseworthy physical activities, quickness and sharpness are better than quietness and slowness. The goal is effective, often swift, action.
Okay, so it fails in the physical realm. What about the mind?
This is where the refutation gets even stronger, because temperance is definitely considered a virtue of the soul, of the mind. Socrates asks, learning. Is it better to learn slowly, quietly, or quickly?
Quickly, definitely. Facility in learning is praised.
Remembering, teaching, deliberating, discovering things, solving problems. In all these mental activities, we admire shrewdness, quickness of perception, the ability to grasp things easily. The quiet mind, if that means slow, isn't seen as superior.
So the logic is pretty clear. If quietness is often inferior to its opposite, quickness in activities we consider good and noble,
then quietness itself can't be temperance, because temperance is supposed to be always good, always admirable. If temperance was just quietness, then the slow runner, the slow learner, the dull thinker would have to be considered more temperate.
which sounds absurd. It contradicts how we actually value those skills.
Utterly. So the temperate life isn't just the slow, quiet life. That definition is shot down.
Okay, attempt one fails. Does Charmides give up?
Not yet. He accepts the refutation, seems thoughtful, and then pivots to a related idea. Maybe temperance isn't about quiet movement, but about feeling. He suggests temperance makes a man feel ashamed or modest. Temperance is modesty, Agits.
The blushing earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the clue. Modesty. That feels different.
It does. It connects temperance to social propriety, to having the right sense of shame about doing wrong things. Seems promising.
But Socrates applies the same test, I assume. Is modesty always good?
Exactly the same test. Temperance, we agree, is always good. It only makes people good.
Hmm.
But what about modesty? Can modesty sometimes be, well, not good? Maybe even bad?
Hmm. Can modesty be bad?
Socrates pulls out a heavy hitter here, a quote from Homer's Odyssey.
What does Homer say?
Modesty is not good for a needy man.
Okay. I think I see where this is going.
Think about it in like a tough social situation.
Yeah.
If someone is genuinely in need, starving maybe, but they're too modest, too ashamed to ask for help or to do work that might seem beneath them.
Then their modesty could lead to a really bad outcome. Suffering, even death for them or their family.
Precisely. In that case, modesty leads to evil, not good. It hinders necessary action. So modesty is sometimes good, feeling ashamed about doing something disgraceful. But sometimes it's bad when it prevents you from doing what's necessary.
But temperance has to be always good.
Always good. Therefore, if modesty is sometimes good and sometimes bad, it cannot be the same thing as temperance. The logic is inescapable.
Wow. So, two very intuitive, common sense ideas about temperance, quietness, and modesty have both been dismantled by this rigorous questioning.
Completely dismantled. Charmides is learning just how hard it is to define these virtues we talk about all the time.
Okay, so Charmides is 0 for 2. Quietness didn't work, modesty didn't work. He must be feeling the pressure now.
Oh, definitely. The text says he hesitates, and then he brings up a third definition, but this time he says he heard it from someone else.
Passing the buck, maybe. Or maybe he heard it from Cratias, who's standing right there.
That becomes a strong possibility later, yeah.
No.
Anyway, the definition he offers is, temperance is doing our own business.
Doing our own business. That sounds profound. Like, mind your own affairs, handle your responsibilities, specialize.
It does sound profound. It has that ring of, civic virtue and personal responsibility. But Socrates immediately flags it. He calls it a kind of riddle.
A riddle. Why? Because it's ambiguous.
Exactly. What does doing our own business actually mean in practice? Socrates instantly applies what we could call the literal test.
Okay, what's the literal test here?
He asks, all right, if temperance is literally just doing your own stuff, what would that look like in society? Should a scribe, a writer, only ever write his own name, never write contracts for others, or even write down the names of his enemies?
Oh no, that would be useless.
Should everyone only do things for themselves? Should every single citizen weave only their own clothes, make only their own shoes, build only their own house?
Society would completely fall apart. You need specialization, trade, people doing things for each other.
Precisely. A state where everyone literally only did their own business, in that narrow sense, would be chaotic, inefficient, poorly run. It would be the opposite of a well-ordered, temperate state.
So the literal meaning leads to absurdity. That can't be what the definition meant.
Correct. And this is where things get really tense. Because Charmides, maybe sensing this is going badly, looks over at Critias.
Ah, the potential source of the definition.
Right. And Critias, according to the text, is getting visibly agitated, embarrassed. His reputation as the wise mentor figure is on the line. He can't let this definition just crash and burn.
So he jumps in.
He jumps in quite defensively. He basically accuses Socrates of twisting the meaning, of deliberately misunderstanding. He insists the definition wasn't meant literally, it was about semantics.
Semantics? How?
Critias tries to elevate the discussion. He brings up a distinction he says he learned from the poet Hesiod. A difference between making things, poien, and doing or working, pretet.
Okay. What's the difference according to Critias?
He argues that making can sometimes be disgraceful, like maybe being a craftsman selling pickles or something considered menial. But doing or working implies noble actions, things proper to a good citizen.
So he's trying to rescue the definition by saying doing our own business refers only to these noble doings, not the menial makings.
Exactly. He refines the definition on the fly. He says, when we say temperance is doing our own business, we mean doing what is proper to a man and that which is his own, and crucially, that which is good.
Ah, so he adds good into it. Temperance becomes the doing of good actions.
Yes, that's the crucial refinement. It shifts the focus from just staying in your lane to actively performing morally good deeds.
Okay, that sounds much more like a plausible definition of a virtue, doing good actions. Does Socrates accept this one?
He accepts it. For a moment, he acknowledges it's a more ethically robust idea, but then almost immediately, he introduces a new and maybe even more devastating logical challenge, the problem of knowledge or awareness.
Knowledge. How does that come into it?
He asks Critias. Okay, let's say temperance is doing good actions. Does the temperate person necessarily know that they are being temperate? Do they have conscious awareness of their own virtue while doing the good deed?
Hmm, good question. Can you do good without realizing it's good or without thinking, aha, I am being temperate right now?
That's the crux. Socrates uses the example of a doctor again. A doctor might successfully cure a patient. That's good action, right?
Seems like it.
But does the doctor necessarily know in that moment the full moral weight of the action? Does he know for sure it's ultimately beneficial for the patient's overall life or happiness? Or does he just know the medical technique?
Yeah, he probably just knows the medicine. He assumes it's good, but doesn't necessarily have, like, deep philosophical certainty about the ultimate goodness of extending that specific life at that moment.
Right. The technical skill is separate from the conscious awareness of the goodness of the act in a larger sense. So Socrates points out, if we follow Critias's definition strictly,
Then someone could be temperate. They could be objectively doing good things, but be completely unaware of their own temperance or wisdom at that moment.
exactly, the good action could exist independently of the person's self-awareness of it.
And how does Critias react to that?
He absolutely hates it. He finds his conclusion impossible. For Critias, it seems, wisdom and temperance must involve self-awareness. A wise person cannot be ignorant of their own wisdom.
He can't accept unconscious virtue.
No. He's so opposed to this idea that he actually backtracks. He withdraws some of his earlier agreements rather than accept that a temperate or wise person could lack self-knowledge of their state.
Wow. So rather than defend the definition against this problem, he sacrifices the definition to protect the idea of self-awareness.
In effect, yes. And this forces the conversation into completely new territory. It's no longer just about actions. Critias makes a bold, definitive statement. He declares, self-knowledge is the very essence of knowledge.
Self-knowledge.
Yes. He directly links temperance to the famous maxim from the oracle at Delphi, know thyself. He basically says that know thyself and be temperate are two ways of saying the same thing.
Whoa. Okay, that's a massive shift. We started with quietness, went to modesty, then doing good deeds, and now temperance is self-knowledge. The whole game just changed.
Completely changed. Now we're deep into epistemology, the theory of knowledge itself.
All right, so Critias has made this huge leap. Temperance isn't just doing good, it is self-knowledge. How does Socrates frame this new definition?
Socrates rephrases Critias's idea to make it crystal clear and maybe also to highlight its potential weirdness. He says, okay, so temperance, or wisdom, because now they're kind of interchangeable, is a special kind of science. It's the science of
The
itself.
science of itself.
Yeah, and not just that, it's also the science of other sciences, and even the science of the absence of science. So it's the science of ignorance, too.
Whoa. Okay, my head hurts already. A science of science? What does that even mean?
It's this idea of reflexive knowledge. Knowledge that can turn back and examine itself, its own nature, its own limits. Think about other sciences, right? Medicine is about health. Geometry is about shapes. Music is about harmony. They all look outward at an object.
Right.
But Critias is proposing a science that looks inward. Its object is knowledge itself. It knows what is knowledge and what isn't knowledge.
Okay, let me try an analogy. Is it like having a super librarian who knows that every book in the library exists and knows precisely which shelf each book is on but hasn't actually read any of them? They know the structure of knowledge, but not the content.
That's a pretty good way to put it, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. It knows that knowledge exists and can identify it, but maybe doesn't know the specific content of medicine or geometry or building. It's a science about science. Socrates himself calls the idea potentially monstrous.
Monstrous. Strong word. So he challenges it.
Immediately. First, he challenges its very possibility. Can such a thing even exist? A science that relates only to itself. He uses analogies to show how weird this self-relation idea is.
What kind of analogies?
He starts with the senses. Think about vision. Can vision see itself?
No. Vision sees color, light, objects. It doesn't see seeing.
Exactly. If vision could only see itself, without seeing color, what would it be seeing? Nothing tangible. Same with hearing. Can hearing hear itself without hearing an actual sound?
No. It needs sound waves. Hearing isn't a thing.
Right. These senses require an external object. A science of science, if it only knows knowing, seems to lack a distinct object in the same way. Then he moves to more abstract relations like mathematics.
Okay. How does it work there?
Think about concepts like greater than. Can something be greater than itself?
No, that's logically impossible. If it were greater than itself, it would also have to be less than itself at the same time.
Perfect. Or double. Can something be the double of itself? No, because then it would also have to be the half of itself. These kinds of self-relations, Socrates argues, are altogether inadmissible in the clear, logical world of magnitudes and numbers.
So, if this self-relation doesn't work for simple numbers or senses, how can it possibly work for something as complex as knowledge itself?
That's the challenge. Socrates basically says, look, it seems impossible for magnitude, maybe barely credible for senses, so this idea of a science of science. It's on really shaky ground. He doesn't definitively say it cannot exist, but he raises serious doubts.
Okay, so maybe it's impossible, but what if, just for argument's sake, we assume it is possible? Does Socrates have another objection?
Oh, yes. This is maybe the killer blow, the utility challenge. Even if this science of science exists, Socrates asks, is it actually useful? Does it help us live better? Does it lead to happiness?
The practical test. What good is it?
Exactly. If wisdom, defined this way, is only the knowledge of knowledge and ignorance,
Yeah.
what can it actually do? Socrates argues it could only tell you that someone possesses knowledge or lacks it.
Like the librarian knowing that there's a medical book on the shelf.
Precisely. But can this science of science tell you what that knowledge is? Can it tell you if the person actually knows medicine or music or building?
According to the definition, no. It only knows knowledge in general, not the specifics.
That's the problem. So the wise person, armed only with this science of science, can know that the doctor claims to have knowledge. But they can't actually judge whether the doctor's medical knowledge is correct or true.
Why not?
Because to judge medicine, you need medical knowledge. To judge building, you need knowledge of building. You don't judge medicine using the science of science. You judge it using medicine itself.
Oh, I see. So this grand science of science can't actually distinguish a real expert from a quack, a true doctor from a pretender.
It appears not. It can only say, yep, that person has a science, or nope, that person is ignorant. It can't evaluate the content or truth of the science.
Wow. So much for the idea that this wisdom would help us live unerringly by finding the true experts. It can't even do that.
It seems utterly useless for that purpose.
Yeah.
The wise person knows that they know or don't know, but not what they know. It's knowledge stripped of all practical content and application.
That feels incredibly empty, a hollow sort of wisdom.
Exactly. The initial promise of temperance, especially as self-knowledge, was that it would lead to good living, to knowing how to act correctly. But this version seems completely detached from any specific good action or beneficial outcome.
So where does Socrates take it from there? Critias must be reeling.
He pushes Critias back to the fundamental question. Okay, forget this science of science for a second. What kind of knowledge actually makes people happy? What knowledge leads to acting well?
Back to basics. Is it knowing how to make shoes?
Critias says no. Knowing how to work brass? No. Even knowing the future, like a prophet. Critias denies that this knowledge itself guarantees happiness.
So none of the specific crafts or even prophecy guarantees happiness on its own. What knowledge is left?
Critias is finally cornered. He's forced to admit that the knowledge which is truly beneficial, the one that ensures we use all other knowledge correctly for our well-being, is the knowledge with which he discerns good and evil.
Ah, the science of good and evil. That sounds like the bedrock.
It does. But here comes the final brilliant twist from Socrates. He points out that Critias has just led them in a huge circle.
How so?
All along, the implicit goal was to find the knowledge that leads to benefit and happiness. Critias proposed science of science, self-knowledge. But now he admits that the truly useful science is the science of good and evil. This means that even if we had perfect experts in medicine, shoemaking, navigation, guided by the science of science, telling us they are experts,
Their actions wouldn't necessarily be beneficial or lead to happiness unless they were also guided by this separate science of good and evil.
precisely. You could have a technically perfect doctor, identified by the science of science, who performs a cure, but whether that cure contributes to the good life, to genuine happiness, depends on the science of good and evil, which the science of science knows nothing about.
So the science of science definition of temperance turns out to be useless for achieving the actual goal of living well.
That's the devastating conclusion. The knowledge that really matters, the science of human advantage, good and evil, is different from the science of science. And if the science of good and evil is the useful one, then the science of science, as a definition for temperance aimed at happiness, is effectively useless.
Wow, what a takedown. They went through all that complex argument about reflexive knowledge only to find it was a dead end for practical virtue.
A brilliant, logical dead end. It clarifies what temperance isn't, even if it doesn't tell us what it is. #tag outro.
So let's recap this intellectual journey. We started with Charmides suggesting temperance is quietness.
which Socrates refuted by showing quickness is often better.
Then Charmides tried modesty, or shame.
But that failed, because modesty isn't always good, unlike temperance,
Then came the riddle, doing one's own business.
which Critias refined into doing good actions. But that stumbled on whether the temperate person needs to know they're being temperate.
Leading Critias to make that big claim, temperance is self-knowledge, the science of science.
And Socrates dismantled that by questioning its possibility and, crucially, its utility. It couldn't distinguish experts reliably, and it wasn't the science of good and evil, which is what really produces benefit and happiness.
So after all that, they end up with no definition.
I
An
love-
aporia, right, an impasse.
Exactly. A classic Socratic outcome. Socrates himself actually takes the blame, saying he's a bad inquirer. He doesn't blame the concept of temperance itself.
Right, he still insists temperance is a great good and that Charmides is lucky if he has it. The failure is in the defining, not in the virtue.
Absolutely. The dialogue brilliantly demonstrates just how incredibly difficult it is to pin down these fundamental moral concepts with the kind of logical rigor Socrates demands. It exposes the limits of easy definitions.
But it also shows the value of the process, right? The value of that questioning.
Immensely so. The real victory isn't finding the definition, it's the method. Socrates has peeled back layers of assumption, forced Critias and Charmides, and us, to confront how loosely we often use important moral terms. It teaches the vital importance of self-examination, of not assuming you know.
And the ending is quite something too. Charmides isn't put off by failing to find an answer.
Quite the opposite. He seems completely won over by Socrates' approach, even though they didn't reach a conclusion. He says he needs this Socratic charming, this constant questioning, every single day.
And Critias basically orders him to submit to it.
Yes, acting as his guardian, he commands Charmides to let Socrates question him. And Charmides' final line is amazing. He tells Critias, addressing Socrates essentially, "Don't worry, I'll submit. In fact, I'll use violence if I have to," meaning he'll compel Socrates to keep questioning him, even if Socrates resists.
Wow. Use violence to force philosophical discussion. That shows a real conversion.
It's powerful. The beautiful youth willingly embraces the force of logic, the violence of rigorous self-examination applied to his own soul. He recognizes its necessity.
Okay, so they didn't define temperance, but that final point Critias was forced to concede, that the really crucial knowledge, the one that guarantees happiness, is knowing good and evil.
Right.
If the science of science couldn't deliver that, and if just assuming we know isn't good enough, what's left? If reason is our tool, what other method could possibly get us closer to understanding good and evil, other than this kind of relentless questioning and self-examination that Socrates demonstrates?
That really is the provocative question left hanging, isn't it? The dialogue demolishes easy answers and points towards a path, a difficult ongoing path of critical inquiry, as the only way to approach that foundational knowledge of human advantage, the knowledge of the good. It suggests that understanding virtue isn't about finding a neat formula, but about engaging in a continuous active process of discernment.
An process that requires us to constantly challenge our own assumptions with that same Socratic rigor. A fantastic place to leave our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.